So we'll go ahead and start the Q&A. So we'll go ahead and have everyone introduce themselves and just say 10-second elevator pitch.
I'm Nancy Benedetti. I just started in private practice in Denver at Radiology Imaging Associates, which is one of the largest private practice groups in Denver. Prior to that, I completed my residency and neuroradiology fellowship at UCSF. One more thing. There's about close to 90 radiologists in my group, and I do almost 100% neuroradiology.
My name is Andy Moriarty. I was a resident at Henry Ford, finished UCLA Abdominal Imaging Fellowship last year, and I am in advanced radiology in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's not a competition, but my group has 130 radiologists, and we service the Michigan State Radiology Residency.
I'm Joseph Yacoub. I work at Loyola University, which is just half an hour from here in Chicago, so it's an academic practice. I also did my training in Chicago at the University of Chicago and Northwestern, so I've always trained within a radius of at most half an hour from here. And I do body imaging. I've been out in practice for 2 years now.
I'm Candice Bookwalter. I just started a job at Mayo Clinic. I do abdominal imaging, ultrasound, and a little bit of cardiac imaging. I did my fellowship, I did an MR fellowship at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and before that was a resident at University Hospital's Case Medical Center in Cleveland.
I'll mention me. I'm a breast radiologist. I trained at Jefferson in Philadelphia for residency, Beth Israel Deaconess in Boston for breast imaging, I do about 2 days a week of administration. I'm essentially the head for peer review, strategic planning, and also education. And then I do about 2 days a week of breast imaging and a day a week of X-ray or general ultrasound. I work for Kaiser Permanente, not to be competitive, but it's a $60 billion nonprofit, the largest nonprofit, including multiple universities in the ranking. Yeah, I think they only have about 9 billion though. And the largest medical group in the state of Colorado at 1,200 physicians, but no competing with anyone. But we'll have the panel maybe tell us something about the job search that surprised you.
A lot of us are introverts, and I would count myself as an introvert, so I'm actually quite a shy person, although most people would not guess that about me. So I kind of started very conservatively in my job search, looking at the ACR website, but I had a couple personal feelers out as well, just to see what would happen. And I actually, what surprised me is the one that I ended up with was one that I had the personal connection with. So ahead of time, which was, I don't know, you always think networking, well, does it really work? Yes, it does.
Excellent. So for the job that you ultimately took, how did you get that? And it's not necessarily for you because you said that was through personal connection, but perhaps...
Well, personal connection, meaning that this was an alumnus from my medical school who was probably several years ahead of me in medical school, but I met him again at RSNA a couple years ago, and we talked about what he was doing. He was head of the MR group at Mayo, and I was like, wow, my fellowship would really fit into that. And he's like, oh, email me sometime. And I did.
Chatter CV ready.
I had somewhat similar, but maybe different also in some sense. So I didn't have a connection with the place that I went to, but I was interested in academic positions. I had few geographical places. I was a bit flexible, but I had preferences, and I just simply reached out to the academic places in my top geographic areas. And one of them initially responded saying they're interested, but they didn't actually have a job position at the time. But we maintained the relationship. I continued looking through the ACR websites and doing the rest of my search. And timing worked out that at the time I needed to make a decision about my job, actually a job had opened in that place. I think at that time there was a second-degree connection that helped me. A friend of a friend happened to be, who knows me well, happened to have a good connection with that place. So that helped too.
Anything you would do differently if you could start your job search tomorrow?
So when I was looking, I did the shotgun approach. I did everything that people recommended. I looked at the job boards. I had been networking on state and national levels. I cold called a bunch of places, and all three of those options, or all four of those options, actually resulted in initial interview leads. And then that it was just, finding a place that actually made a fit. So the job I actually ended up with was posted on a job board, but when I looked a little bit deeper, I knew 3 or 4 people at that group, and I said, hey, I know you're not on the search committee, but can you put in a good word with me with some of your partners? And
so I have a question. Some of you have sort of answered it, but what was the time frame from, say, you sending in your application to a group getting back to you to interviewing to getting an offer or not getting an offer? And were any of those offers kind of expiring, or did they have a deadline, sort of like fellowship that we come across?
There's two questions. It's perfect, though. So last year we did a survey of the fellows, and we didn't end up publishing the data, but maybe next year we will do it. What we found was that most people who are applying tended to apply in the fall now. A lot of private practices tend to know who they're going to hire around this time. What you find out is a lot of people don't get offers until the new year, and then more academic places tend to open up later on in January, February, March once they get their academic year calendar budget. And so the timing for the two can be a little bit different. And I would say once you get an offer, there's kind of a time clock to it. You can delay a little while, but it's always an element of, you can't wait too long.
I think there's a great book out there about he's not that into you or something, which you should totally Google, because this is like a courtship. And if you get an offer, as Andy is describing, and then you sit on it, well, they start to realize he's not that into us. And it's a slow, insidious process, but they also become not interested in you as a result. So keep that in mind. I actually had one group, the president called me and was being fairly aggressive, yelling into the phone saying, "You're just going to have to decide. It's been 6 weeks," which I realized I really didn't want the job.
My question for the panel, for those who recently started, was what experiences in your first 5 or 6 months have you guys had that you might have changed during your fellowship, or things that you might have done to prepare best for your new experiences in private practice in the last 6 months of your fellowship?
So it turns out that once they give you a job offer, I think that they'll usually tell you what additional skills you need. I know my job said we really need people who are good at head and neck. So I read a lot of head and neck cases during at the end of my fellowship and read textbooks on that. They said they need people to do spine intervention procedures, at least in private practice is big. They need people to do all sorts of procedures because they have to staff a lot of sites. So the more people that can do them, the more flexible the scheduling. So, but they usually, I found, at least for my job, told me exactly what they wanted, so I could focus the rest of my fellowship on getting those skills.
Which is another advantage to starting the process early. Then you reserve time during your fellowship to acquire the specialized kind of good fit skill set. If you find out very late, then it's harder to do that. Okay.
I realize that might change. You get hired for something one day, and then the guy that doesn't do angios anymore retires, and now Nancy has to do that too. So just be flexible and be willing to do whatever the group needs to do if it's a place where you want to be.
You hope their existing deaf echographer keeps working and doesn't retire. Otherwise, you have new role for group. As new guy, little say in that process. Okay?
How have you guys found your actual job as compared to what they told you it would be?
So the question, how I understand it, is how does your current job compare to the job with which they told you?
I would say my experience has been on the positive side. Is the job was what I expected to be and what I was looking for. I guess the advice I can give in that is that communicate as much as possible when you are in that stage of interviewing. Ask as much questions as possible. Get to know the group. Get to know the people in there and talk to them as much as possible. I had a positive experience in that sense.
Mine was the same. So my job's been pretty much what they told me it would be. The only thing that I would say, just as advice, is once you get the job offer, it's still okay to ask questions. Don't feel like just because the interview is over, you have to stop asking questions. You can clarify anything that comes up as you need to, kind of the whole time. So feel free to ask questions.
And I would just add to that after you've received a job offer, in my mind, there is no better time than to start asking questions that you avoided on your interview and you avoided before you have an offer. I remember calling multiple group members and testing for concordance. This is what I was told. Is this the case, or am I mistaken? That's good strategy, I think.
Just forget what the answer was on that day, because I took notes on my interviews, but there's still things that you're just like, okay, what was that again? And then you just ask again. No big deal.
Do you have any advice for couples in radiology that are applying for jobs? Is that a favorable situation or something that gives you a disadvantage?
Is it just to clarify, you're talking about doing a couple's finding a job as both people in radiology at the same time?
Correct.
That's going to be tough. No, you have to start that process early. You have to obviously go into it with an open mind and say, I'm looking for a specific kind of job. You have to know what you want, what your partner wants, and then you have to find either a city that's large enough to have two groups and support it, or you have to have large groups that you could both have a job within them. So I think one of the big things is, once you decide where you want to be or where you want to apply, you make that right up front and honest on your application. You say, it's kind of a two-person deal here, and there are definitely places that are looking for that.
Do you have any couples in your current practices?
I am a couple.
Oh, you are?
And we just hired a pair, a neuroradiologist, and then somebody else to staff one of our smaller sites.
My wife's private practice, anesthesiology practice, has several couples also. I think it's more common than one might think. But you can also apply individually. Let them figure out you're a couple. If you establish the linkage early on, it may be really good because they know it's two or none. But the other strategy is to say, well, if you'll take one of us, perhaps the other one will keep looking, and hopefully you'll be able to survive for a few months without both of you having a job. So that's another option if you don't insist on the linkage. It's like a chess match. Exciting.
I'm the president of a radiology group besides being a chairman. I just thought I'd share a little bit of my perspective on this. First of all, the single question that I get asked more often than not, and I've been at it for 26 years, is would you hire this person for your group? And so as a resident, you want to demonstrate to the people who are going to ask that question those characteristics that are going to make you, your chair or program director, say, absolutely, you'll be really happy with this person. So the question then goes to references. So, one of the comments was to put references on your cover letter, and I'll give you my perspective. I pay almost no attention to letters of recommendation and references, whether it's medical students that I interview for the residency or people I interview for a job, for one simple reason. You only ask for letters from people who are going to write you a good letter. So what you want is you want people who are objective. So there's a concept called due diligence, and due diligence means that as a person who's responsible for the group, you have to do everything to make sure that you've hired the right person. And in fact, it becomes a medical legal issue because there's an ever-growing threat of suing credentials committees for improper credentialing. So very often the chair has to present that person to the credentialing committee and say, this is somebody that I'm endorsing, and has to really stand behind it. So the single person that I always call when I'm looking to interview somebody is the program director and the chair of the department. Those are the people that you want to make sure hold you in high regard. Last thing, it's a little bit, it's something that comes up in a lot of interviews, and I'll be interested in all of your perspective on it. I find that people that I hire these days often want to start 3 months, 2 months, or after the end of their fellowship. And my advice is to approach that relatively gingerly. Very often you don't know what the needs of the group are. You want to seem like a team player who's out to help out. Sometimes you're moving, you need more time, but 3 months off, 2 months off may send the wrong message. Thank you.
That's helpful advice. And I think there's a lot of heterogeneity. Some of the people will start right away after fellowship. Some people need to move. Some people want to go to Africa for a month. So make sure that you're open in communication. It's kind of a recurring theme that we're having is that compatibility and negotiation is done in good faith and gently, which I think was the word described.
Do you have a strategy for balancing a desire to look like a person who's flexible and adaptable to whatever job they need you to do versus standing your ground and getting what you want out of your job offer in the end and being happy at your job?
So even though I've just started my job, I've had the opportunity to participate in a lot of interviews, and I would say be agreeable to everything. I mean, unless for some reason, you really don't want to do it. Just being agreeable is being positive, and people like positivity in general. So I do see that when people are like, oh, I don't want to do this, or I'm kind of lukewarm on that, it creates a negative impression in some ways. So I think just being agreeable to everything is the way to go, generally speaking.
I would definitely totally support that. At the end of the day, when you take a job, what really matters in your day-to-day job is how well you function as a group with your colleagues. If you're, easygoing, willing to work willing to work out things with people, and they're likewise, everybody's life will be much easier. So really, at the end of the day, it's working together as a group that is what matters. So putting the interest of the group ahead.
The only thing to add to that is being agreeable is definitely should. Absolutely. You need to fit into the group. But that doesn't mean you can't grow something that isn't already there if the group is willing. So then that's something that maybe it's something of your interest that you want to build at that particular institution. Just as long as they're willing to grow that with you, and you can test that out, that's okay too.
Outstanding question. A very, very tricky thing to navigate, but definitely I agree with everyone's take on it. And at the risk of making it sound really depressing, we could say in some ways that when you think about getting tenure or becoming a partner or a shareholder in your group practice, you can kind of think of your first day at work as your attending job as the first of a 3 to 6 year interview after your 6-year training interview.
So everybody kind of tells you, get a lawyer to look at your contract, and then I talk to people that are like management of a group, and they're like, well, we're not going to change anything anyway. So is that really just like a waste of money, or how many of you guys got a lawyer to look at your contract?
I actually didn't have a lawyer look at my contract, but if you don't know what you're reading through, then it probably won't hurt. You've spent a lot of time in your education investing in yourself. Having someone explain it to you in very basic terms, is worth a couple $100. Your group might not change something. You might see something in there that doesn't sit well with you, and you could ask for it. But it's a negotiation. You already have the offer. They like you. You know that you like them. You just want to know what you're getting into, and I think that it's probably worth it if you don't understand what the contract says exactly to make sure that someone can help you go into that eyes open.
Excellent advice. Did anybody pay for an attorney to review their contract? Anyone? No? Okay, so we have a sample of 5. None of us paid an attorney. Average attorney rates I've seen are between $700 and $2,000. You can get someone who's not an attorney to review it maybe for a couple $100 with variable quality. But I think if it's written in plain English, I think that ultimately the contract I signed was 3 pages long of plain English. But I've reviewed tons of contracts for people, and I've seen 75 pages of legalese that is really probably should get an attorney for that. So heterogeneity abounds with that. You referenced a negotiation, I think, Andy, with the comments. And I wonder whether anyone on the panel, something I get asked a lot is, can I negotiate anything from the offer that was provided? And day one of business school, they reinforced that everything's negotiable. So I wonder if anyone tried that through their job search process. Oh, Andy did.
I negotiated for what I wanted, and that involved, turning down jobs that didn't fit what I wanted. But, once you find the job you want, I think the most important thing for me was all the partners had the same contract. We all shared the responsibilities equally. We didn't come to the work list and say, I'm an abdominal imager. This side of the table is really heavily abdominally tilted. But I didn't say, well, I only read the kidney protocol CTs, and everybody else can read the high-res chest and enterographies. So I found my negotiation form was finding exactly what I wanted.
I would say that in people that I've counseled about negotiation, the strategy is to find one thing to go for, not 20 things to go for, because then they don't want you in the group anyway. So focus on 1 or 2 things and try to push for that, because you'd be surprised with what emerges. I've seen people get higher salaries, as high as 15%. I've seen people get more time off. I've seen people have different places that they work. I know people that have had their years to partnership changed from 3 to 2 or to 1.5. So if they really need you, and if you're compatible, there are opportunities. But you might want to expect them to tell you something. I can almost picture like all these hiring bodies have a rubber stamp that says, we don't negotiate until they do, which many of them do. So keep that in mind. You expect some resistance, but keep pushing. Anything else, Joe?
I was just going to add to that, kind of also to the comment of being agreeable. Like being agreeable doesn't mean not expressing your interests. So negotiation doesn't have to be like, all or none. Negotiation can be, here are my interests, here's where I would like to go in the future. But if that's not available now, then I'll continue adding value till I make my point that I deserve this.
Very well said.
I'm going to give you the uplifting thing. I do have one friend. It was 2 years ago, but he negotiated box seats into his IR contract. So he has box seats for the local basketball stadium.
You definitely want to start with box seats in your negotiations. Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you to our panelists and for attending the symposium.